let's get real here for a second. I really hate to do this. I didn't want to have to do this. I really did not. Imagine if the roles were reversed and it was like a 35-year-old male teacher picking up a 12-year-old girl on the side of the road without interacting with her parents.
This movie made me cry for a while as well.
Did this movie make you cry as a kid and an adult?
No.
You didn't cry as a kid.
No, and actually I did not like this movie very much as a kid. I didn't hate it, but I totally misunderstood it. I was not the brightest child, and I thought that this movie was about Terabithia. I thought it was about like kids finding a magical land in their woods. And so I just remember watching it and having this impression later of like, yeah, the action just wasn't very good. Like I don't know, it just wasn't very exciting. Not understanding that is absolutely not the point of the movie.
Yeah, when I'm thinking back to my childhood when this movie came out in 2007, I remember watching the trailers and thinking the same thing. I was thinking that this was going to be another fantasy, whimsical adventure that focused on mythical creatures and conquests. And if I remember correctly, the trailers even made it seem that way. But
Hmm.
of course, when I watched it, it was like a rug pull, and it was a very violent one. And I can't remember if I cried as a child. I definitely watched it the year it came out. I remember it made me feel very empty inside because it doesn't necessarily end on a positive note. But I don't know if I cried. I had a way harder time holding back tears as an adult. Um, Maybe because I understand it more. Like you're saying, as a kid, you don't really pick up on the messaging, but I definitely picked up on everything this time. What about you, Kevin?
Well, I never saw it as a kid, but I could understand what you're saying. As a child of the age of 10 or 11, it's hard to pick up those references and understand what is actually going on in the story. Um, like I said, I didn't see this as a kid, but one movie I can use as examples. I watched My Girl when I was a kid. I don't know
Mm,
if you guys have seen that, where Macaulay Culkin, ends up dying from the bees. And I saw it as a kid, and it didn't affect me. But then I saw it as an adult, maybe a couple of years ago, and it hit me completely differently because I guess you understand the innuendos and the gestures and the analogies, and also understanding death. Between children and children dying. Like as a young kid, you don't understand those things, but as an adult, you understand it. And it hits you differently, and that movie is a sad movie to me. That one made me feel something. So I don't have anything to compare that to with Bridge to Terabithia. It was a sensitive movie, though. It had a sensitive message regarding childhood friendships and death as children. So it did hit me there, but
go ahead, Alex.
I think perspective, having different perspectives changed the emotional impact for me a lot. Because as a kid, I mean, I did understand what happened. I didn't understand the broader concept of what the movie was about. But when what's her name? When Leslie died, I understood what had happened. But I think as a kid, I really only thought about it from the protagonist's perspective. And while it is sad to think of the story from his perspective, what really triggered my emotions a lot more while watching this recently was really not thinking about Jesse's version of events at all. It was thinking about things like his dad, who had been developing a more and more strife-filled relationship with his son, and he had been harder and harder on his son over time. And then he sees this horrible thing happen, and he wants nothing more than to just repair his relationship with his son. I think of it from the perspective of Leslie's parents, and as someone who plans to be a father someday, this movie scares the hell out of me. Uh, the idea that, if you want your children to be free and happy and creative, which I do, there it comes with the possibility that any day could be their last, and you could have your whole life upended at any moment, which is horrifying. Um, Even thinking about it from his little sister's perspective, which that little girl steals the show in this movie, I must say.
She's adorable.
Yeah, she's adorable, and she's she's probably the best actor on set, which is funny because she's like
Yeah.
4 years old. Um, but the way that she interacts with her brother, and she can tell that he's sad and she wants to help him. Um, yeah, all of those things were what made me emotional. Not so much really Jesse's experience at all.
I think for me, what made me emotional the second time around, there was, first of all, just for context, there was probably 15 years between my viewings of this movie. This time around, I think it was more emotional because I knew what was going to happen. And you would think that that would make it easier to take, but it actually made it a lot harder because you really feel for Jesse in this movie. He does not have a very good home life. His family is poor. His older sisters don't really interact with him and they bully him to an extent. He does not have a good relationship with his father. His father's very cold and distant and way more focused on his daughters than Jesse. Jesse's also bullied pretty heavily at school. He's an introvert. He does not have many friends. He does not have good interactions with the teachers. And his life seems to be being absorbed within his own art and just trying to get around interacting with any other people because it usually goes poorly for him. I really feel for him as a character. And when Leslie is introduced, she's sort of like this saving grace. I mean, she's very bubbly, very kind, also very creative and artistic. And she sort of just comes into Jesse's life out of nowhere. And as the viewer, you're like, wow, this is amazing. These two characters are, on paper, very easy targets for bullies, but they come together through their love for art and creativity, and you really are pulling for their relationship together, and you want them to become closer, and you want them to go to their fantasy land, Terabithia, and you want it to end up like a fairy tale. And the fact that it doesn't, and my second time around, the entire film, I know that it's not going to end up that way. It sort of uh, brought a lump in the back of my throat and like slight tears to my eyes, just in general. And I don't know, the bullying, seeing the bullying in the film happen this time around was pretty hard for me to watch. And I was trying to talk to you guys about this last night before our whole system blew up and glitched up and exploded. But the scene where they're in the music class and the students are all together, so it's Jesse, Leslie, the bullies, and then the unnamed students all in the same classroom, and they're all singing "Why Can't We Be Friends?" That scene was like so powerful to me because it's like throughout the entire film there's these antagonists, there's these like really um impactful negative things happening to Jesse and happening to Leslie by these bullies. And in that one moment, they're just all together having fun in class, singing "Why Can't We Be Friends?" And I'm just like, I don't know. I can't really describe how that made me feel, but that was probably the closest I came to crying in this time around watching the movie.
Did you experience bullying at those ages?
Yeah, I definitely did, and I want to say that's why it affected me. Mine was like way to a different extent though. Like I can relate to Jesse, but there was never another student who I mean, of course there was never a transfer student who came in and shared all my same interests and lived right beside me and we had all these great moments together. Like that never happened. So it was something I had to deal with myself, which is a completely different process. So it I was bullied, but yeah, I don't. It wasn't very similar to what happened in this movie.
Yeah, I never had really strong bullying experiences. I mean, I experienced a lot of teasing, especially because I was always undersized, going from maybe fourth grade and onwards, I was always like significantly smaller than everyone else. So there was a lot of teasing, but there were very, very few incidents in my childhood of what felt like just like totally, uh, I don't know the word, intentional, hateful bullying. That I really did not experience that very much.
Yeah, I would say I had it worse than Jesse, to be honest. Like, not my
Really?
home life, but my school life, 100%.
How about you, Kevin?
Was I bullied? Yeah, I was bullied a lot as a kid. We moved a lot when I was younger. I think I went to like the 9 different elementary schools. So being the new kid several times over, sometimes more than once a year, easy target. I kept to myself though. It didn't really got bad or anything until about high school when it was like a fight every day at the high school. But that's it's like jail. It comes to be a daily thing. You get used to it and you move on. Um, I was teased, picked on, but I don't think I was ever bullied to the point where I was beat up or anything like that. So not that kind of bullying. More the emotional abuse, I guess.
I would say that I experienced an equal share of physical and emotional and psychological, and the physical stuff was scary, but I would say the most damaging and long-lasting stuff was probably the emotional, like taunting and constant like beating down of
Mm-hmm.
my psyche.
Well, a lot of it is, based on your response as well. Like, um, I feel like a lot of what bullying is. I mean, you have bullying that's like literally, I just want to make someone suffer, and then you have bullying that comes from kids who are just like happy, well adjusted, have good friends, blah blah blah, and they see people that are like losers and are, you know, fill in the blank, whatever's wrong with them, and they just genuinely want to like make fun of them. It's like, oh, look at this loser. And honestly, I think part of why I didn't have a lot of like very powerful, or I keep using that word, like uh memorable bullying experiences, is my like coping mechanism actually turned out to be like really good at sort of deflecting bullying, which was that I would just like go along with it and like laugh along with the people, like when they would be saying that I was like from Auschwitz or that I was, like I don't even know, a baby or something like that. I would just be like, "Oh, I know it's so weird, right?" And then I would just like basically be like their little class clown sidekick person, which certainly is a little bit demeaning to think back on, but it worked in terms of like usually they would stop. They would stop after a little bit.
Hmm.
Another thing is I was definitely a teacher's pet, so being a nerd was huge. That constantly got on me for being a nerd. But I was just self-aware enough to like not deny it and just be like, yeah, I'm a nerd. Oh well.
Yeah, I kind of had an opposite thing or an opposite path from that. Like it made me do worse in school because I didn't want to be in school. So there was no protection from teachers. I don't think teachers liked me because I mean, what teacher who barely gets paid anything and fucking hates their job and hates the kids is going to see the quiet kid who never contributes anything sitting at the back of the class and be like, oh, I want to help him. I like him. Like, it was actually very frequently the opposite. That I did not feel like most teachers liked me just because like, they would get upset with me. And I'm like, dude, I have like psychological issues going on right now. And these students surrounding me are like tormenting me. Like, I don't know, man. Teachers never really helped me. Um, the most they ever did would be like to tell me to turn the other cheek. And I'm like, dude, I just got like punched in the fucking face in front of you. You did nothing to the kid and you're telling me to turn the other cheek. Like teachers there are not gods of the school. They're just as scared as I was.
It's also very difficult, like even if their heart is in the right place, like it takes skill to get through to a kid who is experiencing a lot of hardship. Uh, I have a tiny bit of very limited substitute teaching experience, uh, and I particularly remember this one middle school kid. He was probably sixth grade, and he was just so locked down. And I did see him get made fun of, and he sat by himself, and uh, I tried to like talk to him, because I saw that he was not having a good day, and I tried to go over and talk to him and help him out with doing some work, and he just totally gave me the cold shoulder. And of course, that I'm sure he did want help, but he just didn't even know how to accept it. Uh, so yeah, it's a tough situation.
Well, I've completely made peace with it now. Obviously, this is stuff from decades ago. I'm not the same person I was back then. I'm not even the same person I was like 10 years ago. So that's, again, I've completely patched up any damage that was done, or at least mostly patched it up, and I'm completely fine with all that now. But to answer your question, um, I obviously bullying is a very broad spectrum, but I couldn't necessarily relate to Jesse in the film as much. It was just a very different type of bullying, I would say.
I related to him in the sense of being a middle child, because I had a have little siblings and older siblings, and you know that sense that he has of kind of just being left out, where like his little sister is the cute one and she gets the attention, and his older sisters are, they have more freedoms than he does, and probably get more financial attention, where he can't even afford a pair of shoes to run in, um, and he
Not to
just
interject, was the baby a girl too?
Yeah.
So
oh
he
yeah, I
was
forgot
also
that there
the,
was a baby.
he was also the only boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember the
But
baby. I never paid attention enough to know if it was a boy or a girl.
yeah, I think they did a good job of making him that, like, giving him that invisible feeling, where he's sort of just like the missing link of the family, uh, and he doesn't really fit in. He doesn't like any of his sisters throughout the movie, um, which
And
is
he's
tough.
wearing hand-me-down clothes from girls from his sisters, which is another source for his bullying.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
There was one scene I forgot to mention that also got to me emotionally a little bit, which was when his teacher pulled him out of the classroom, and not Miss Edmonds, right? Not Miss Edmonds, who took him on the field trip, but the teacher that everyone hated, that was super callous and
Monster
mean,
Mouth.
Monster Mouth. Yes, when she pulled him out of the classroom, and she had that vulnerable moment where she recognized how, perfect and special Leslie was, and how it was tearing her up that she was gone, and that if it was affecting her that much, she knew that it could only be affecting him that much more. That really hit me.
That was some
That
good
was
acting right there by that lady. I don't know what her name was, but that was a good solid moment for that movie.
that was a really good moment, especially because throughout the film she was built up as being, like you said, very callous and mean, and the students were scared of her. And you think that Jesse's about to be pulled into the hallway and like brutally scolded for punching that kid in the face, and then it's just like the most human response she could have possibly had for him. That was a really good moment.
And that's a big part of this movie, is humanizing our enemies, humanizing people that we see as uh, gross or mean or whatever, and uh, a lot of times people are just that way because they are just that way, but just as often people are that way because, and it's not their fault. Obviously this point has been said by many people in many ways, but bullies are usually doing what they're doing to because it's the only way that they can exert control over their own life. Uh, Usually the people that are the worst bullies have the worst home lives, and that's not always true. Sometimes they
Mm-hmm.
just come out of privileged households where they've never been told no, and they just become cruel, and that sucks. But especially if you're in a poor school, I know everybody learned to recognize the really mean-spirited kids that came from households of addicts and squalor. It's just painful to see.
I think what you're speaking of right now is very apparent in the character arc of Janice Avery, the bully in the film, one of the main bullies in the film. Um, Jesse and Leslie actually humanize her in order to defeat her and get one over on her, and then they humanize her in order to build her back up and treat her like an equal. So, as I've said, she was the main bully within the film. She is just terrorizing everyone. She takes Maybelle's Twinkies. She only lets people in the bathroom if they give her $1. But as the viewer, you see that she's not very well dressed. Her hair is kind of disheveled, and she's clearly got some issues going on. So to defeat her, they forge a letter from the most popular eighth grade boy in the school that where he professes his love for her and that they need to ride on the
It's
bus together.
nefarious.
It is nefarious. It's very good though. It's very clever. And they give it to Janice Avery, and then the entire school bus watches her dream crumble as well. I think his name was like Wilbur something. As Wilbur completely rejects her and doesn't know what she's talking about, and then she's just utterly defeated after that. And the movie could have left that alone. The movie could have just had Janice Avery get defeated and just not be a part of it again. But they allowed her to be further humanized where she's crying in the bathroom. Leslie goes and talks to her and figures out that her father is abusing her and she has a terrible home life. And then she becomes an ally. And I think that character arc is so important. And I'm so glad they put that in there because, like I said, they could have just said, this is the bully. This person sucks. They deserve this embarrassment, and that's it. But the fact that Janice Avery is able to be built back up and redeemed is and given a place in Terabithia in the finale of the film, I think that's very important, and I love that they included that within the film.
Yeah, I am really glad that that was included. I will say one of my stronger critiques of the film, which there's not a whole lot of critiques I have, but one of my critiques is that I think that they could have done a little bit more with Janice, because I mean, I think that the arc of how she's perceived by Jesse and Leslie is great, but she isn't really actually included in the real world. Uh, but she's included in Terabithia, and that is just a little bit confusing to me. Like I think I would have liked to have seen her maybe be invited to Terabithia in real life, but I will also take that criticism and say this movie works, and really any criticisms I have are basically nitpicks, and I don't know if it would help or not actually, because the movie as it was made and as it was packaged is super effective, and so in reality I would say don't change a thing. I mean leave it where it is.
Yeah, it seems like this happens every episode now. I don't think that they should have taken any other character to Terabithia. I think that we need to first break down what Terabithia even is. As we said earlier, as children, we believed that it was just a whimsical fantasy land and oh, it's going to be so awesome and the CGI looks great. But in reality, Terabithia is a coping mechanism of the two main characters to escape from unpleasant aspects of their own lives. Terabithia is purely a coping mechanism. I mean, they're literally coping as they're turning the antagonists from their own lives into characters within this fantasy land and defeating them in the fantasy land, which, as we know, sometimes carries over into being able to best them in real life. I mean, you had the Squogers, you had obviously the troll version of Janice Avery, and you also have the Dark Master, which we find out in the very end of the film. So he's been like this behind the scenes foreboding force that Jesse is terrified of and Leslie's terrified of, and like, oh, the Dark Master's controlling all of these bad guys in Terabithia. And in the very end of the film, we find out that Jesse has been visualizing the Dark Master as his own father. And that, again, that's also powerful. And it was very fitting that in the final showdown with the Dark Master, that is when Jesse is being comforted about the death of Leslie. And you see the only emotion and love throughout the entire film that Jesse's father shows him. So, all that to
I don't know
say,
about the only emotion in love.
uh, that he shows Jesse.
Yeah, I felt like his father is a very complex character, and I actually really enjoyed the arc between Jesse and his father in this this rewatching of the movie. Um, the first interaction that he has with his father is where his father actually advocates for him to get new running shoes. His mom is telling him, "Oh, it's fine. You can just, color over the pink or whatever." And his dad is like, "No, he needs new running shoes. Let's get him some running shoes." And then his mom talks to him, and then he comes back and he's like, "It's okay," basically. And we see there that he does care about his son, but we also get the first inkling of like resentment towards his father because he saw that change of how easily he changed his mind on that. And yeah, there's a lot of negative interactions that he has with his father, but his father also, he gets him a birthday present, and then when the birthday present kind of sucks, he's like upset about that because he wanted to get his son a good birthday present. And yeah, the relationship is very flawed, but I think that we see that his father cares for Jesse throughout the film. But other minor things just get in the way and build up until something so important, Leslie dying, happens to really clarify what's important in their relationship.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I just think that Jesse did not interpret any of that as loving acts, and we're not meant to think that he interpreted any of that as love from his father. And again, I want to go back to Terabithia. That's why he sees his father as the Dark Master until the very end of the film. And to your credit and to the father's credit, I think that he had whatever five other daughters and only one son. He knew how to be gentle and loving for the daughters. He did not know how to interact with a male child. That's especially apparent in the scene where his father's putting Maybell to bed. He's like, "Good night, love you," and then he just turns to Jess and he's like, "Lights out, Jess," and then just walks out of the room. Like he doesn't know how to interact with his son until something so tragic happens that it brings them closer together.
It's true. I mean, he definitely has issues. I don't think it's a problem of where his heart's at. I think it's just like you said, not knowing how to interact with his son. Um, and there's also genuine questions posed by the film, I think, and left somewhat open ended. But there are real issues of how much whimsy is too much in a child's life. At what point do you have to start saying, "Get your head out of the clouds," and you need to start being real? Because, this animal breaking into our garden and eating our food is genuinely affecting our lives and our well being. Um, there's scenes like that where Jesse doesn't understand the seriousness of certain situations. It's a hard thing. You want to protect your children from having to have such responsibilities and adult like thoughts at an early age. Uh, there's a line that I really like where Jesse is ranting to Leslie about that event where he gets talked at by his dad, and he says, "What's so good about being serious all the time anyway?" And I was thinking about that after the movie. I was like, that's an interesting intuition. That it's like you can be the most practical person, but what's the point of being practical all the time if there's no creativity and whimsy behind it?
I like that. I was sort of thinking something along the same lines, and I think that if we go back to the animal in the garden, it was like Jesse's father's perspective was we have to kill it, trap it, and kill it, and Jesse's perspective was why can't we just let it do what it does? And I think the true answer is that there can be a happy medium. So there, like you said, there can be some seriousness of getting rid of the animal, but there can also be some creative liberty and whimsy, and just maybe taking it far, far, far away and releasing it in some field somewhere 5 miles away.
Yeah, and I think another big thing that this movie does, at least for me, is it forces me to it forces the viewer to consider how different adults and children can perceive the same situation or series of events. Um, Even something like Leslie's parents, where I think Leslie's parents seem like fantastic parents from what little we see of them. Um, But we also learn that Leslie thinks that she's basically being neglected by them. That's just an interesting situation where it's like, here we have these people who are very creative people, very uh, seemingly positive. They're financially sound. They give their daughter a lot of freedom to do what she wants. Um, and yet, despite all that, they're so involved in their writing process that they don't realize that their daughter sees herself as neglected. Uh, and so that event is just something that makes me reflect a little bit on making sure that you don't get too caught up in your adult perception of your child's life.
Well, regarding the father and his relationship, I can understand that. I've seen movies where that kind of relationship is portrayed. I've seen in real life that kind of portrayal of father son. I think it's just how they're raised. When especially families who farm and do chores and stuff at home, that is their livelihood. So he is tougher on the boy because he expects the boy to do his part, and he's softer on the girls because they're not going to do the same thing that the boys are going to do. So uh, it did seem like it was a strained relationship from the rip, but there's also moments where you do see that he does care for his son, that maybe he just doesn't know how to express it. And it sucks that it took a tragedy in his son's life for him to realize that he was doing it wrong and to getting along with your son and finding ways to bond with him. But he did in the end, and that's what's important. I like the actor. I forget his name. The actor who played the dad.
Robert
He's
Patrick,
really
I
good.
think.
I like him. I've seen him in some other things.
He
So he
was the
portrayed that very
Terminator.
well.
Hear me, Kevin? He was the
Yeah, he's
Terminator.
T-1000. I can't remember. I know who he is. I just can't recall his name.
It's Robert
Yeah,
Patrick,
he
I
was
think.
T-1000 in Terminator 2.
I wanted to talk about the fact that there's a lot of foreshadowing for Leslie's death throughout the entire film.
Yeah, I don't know
Give an
if I picked up
example.
on any of that.
Yeah, give an example.
There's a ton of examples here. I'll run through some right now. So, um, the project where the students have to say a poem in front of the class, Leslie's poem, underwater breathing or self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, is literally like a description of her death. She's describing how she's underwater looking up at the shimmering light. She's like, I'm looking back up at where I once was and where I will go again when I am done here. And obviously, you're originally thinking she's just talking about diving, but she's literally poetically describing her death in the water. And I highly recommend you guys either going back and watching that clip or going online and reading self-contained underwater breathing apparatus because it's very um, touching once you know what eventually happens to her. Also, when they first find the rope, Jesse makes a comment like, "Are you sure this thing is safe?" Which clearly it's not. And every time the rope is consecutively shown in the film, the water is higher and higher and higher in every scene. And you probably remember the scene where they're going across and the rope is actually touching the water because the levels have risen so much. Not to mention,
Kind of.
Leslie comes up with the concept of traveling across a body of water to go to a fantasy land, which is very symbolic of going to the other side, aka dying.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of foreshadowing there when the river rose up and he's like, wow, it's gotten so deep or so big. And I was like, yeah, something's going to happen with the river. I did kind of see some foreshadowing there. Still, you don't really expect it. You think it's a Disney movie. Nobody's going to die. But she did, and it
I
was
just don't
sad.
pick up. I just don't pick up on things like that. Usually, um, yeah, I'm not good at reading between the lines.
Well,
That all flew past me.
when she's reading that poem in front of the class, there's literally bubbles animated coming out of her mouth and rising to the top. I mean, and she hits her head and drowns in the film. It's very direct with its foreshadowing, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, you could say that, but for me, I just thought of it as like she was talking about basically like scuba diving or just being underwater and how magical an experience that is. Like, genuinely, the idea of that being her drowning, a foreshadowing of her drowning, did not cross my mind.
nothing is included in art for no reason for the most part, especially like a story. Nothing is included for no reason, in my opinion.
Well,
Hmm.
I'm not trying to argue that it was not intended. I'm just saying I just don't pick up on things like that. I don't think that that was like a an obvious an extremely obvious foreshadowing. I think it is more obvious on a rewatch, especially after you've talked to someone like Will who knows everything.
Dude, you're literally smarter than me. Relax.
But yeah, that's some interesting stuff. Foreshadowing is an interesting tool. It can make you it can be subconscious sometimes as well. Like the water rising is something that I don't think I picked up on consciously, but I think I did subconsciously have an increasing feeling of uh like foreboding as the movie went on. I mean, for a lot of reasons of what was going on with the story, but one of them being that yeah, the crossings just became a little bit more sketchy.
Yeah, very true. And I think another, you can call this foreshadowing or symbolism, but you guys probably remember when they use the rope swing and cross, they become invisible for a split second. They enter the brush and you can't see them anymore. And again, I think that's symbolic for you
Hmm.
can't see a person once they've died and they've gone to the afterlife. They're just gone at that point. It's abrupt.
A big part of what makes this movie work for me is it feels 100% sincere. That word sincere was sort of just ringing in my head for a couple days after watching this movie. And to me, it just means the creators took their story very seriously. Uh, Throughout the writing and the production process, it was um, sincere. And despite it makes little critiques seem like not even worth doing to me. There's so many things that you could nitpick about this film. Things like the CGI, or little plot holes here and there, which there are plot holes. But it there's no point. There's almost no point because the finished product is so powerful that I can forgive a lot, and that's just something that I don't see a whole lot of these days. Uh, a lot of movies that come out nowadays, it it's hard to verbalize the issues that I have with them because the easiest things to critique about modern movies is sloppy visuals, lazy writing, bad acting, bad casting, uh, not being true to source material. But the thing is, sometimes I'll sort of bring those things up in a conversation with a lay person who doesn't have the same philosophy of movies as I do, and they'll just kind of be like, "Yeah, but it's just entertainment, right? Like it's okay for the CGI to not be perfect." And it's like, "Yeah, but that's not really what I'm trying to say. I'm not really trying to critique those things. I'm trying to critique the heart behind it or the lack thereof." And this is a movie that has heart throughout. Uh, I watched also this week The Electric State on Netflix, and
I saw that as well.
my God, that is just one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. I think it's the worst book to movie adaptation I've seen since Aragon, and that's really saying something. Luckily, critics have been disparaging it pretty heartily, and it is set to be a total flop and failure. So that makes me feel a little bit better. But it really just upsets me that it exists in the first place.
I kind of had an idea that's the way it was going too, because I know when the first day it came out, I got a notification on Netflix on my phone for Netflix, and I clicked on it, and it said it was the number one movie in the U.S. on Netflix. And then the next day when I went to watch it, it had dropped to number three. So something told me that it wasn't as good as they had hyped it, and I did watch it, and I completely agree with you. And I never read the source material, the original book, but it wasn't a very good adaptation.
Yeah, and I have read the source material. The Electric State by Simon Stålenhag is incredible. It's probably my favorite graphic novel. Well, top three graphic novels, and it's dark. It's very introspective. It gives you feelings of horror and isolation. It's extremely aesthetic, and it has a lot to say about society. It's got a lot of social commentary, but very much uh, cryptic social commentary. And then they made a movie on it, and they turned it into just like a cheesy, uh, kiddie, bright, colorful, happy-go-lucky, like just it's just an abomination, and it's heartless. It's completely soulless, uh, and it makes me mad because they could have done that and not based it off of a great book, but they had to just totally vandalize a perfectly good work of art.
Well, we see it a lot, unfortunately. I read the Gunslinger trilogy by Stephen King, which was the Dark Tower trilogy. I read the first one, The Gunslinger, which became a movie, and the movie was terrible, but the book was really good. So that's one. I mean, it happens all the time. Every time that Hollywood gets a hold of these movies, they are worse than the book material ever was. And as big as a franchise as it was, they said the same thing about Harry Potter, that the movies were not as good as the book.
Um, I appreciate both of your commentary about those other series. Just to rope things back in a little bit, how did you guys feel about the music teacher character, Miss Edmonds? What did you feel like was her purpose within the film? Because I have a very strong opinion about her, and I just want to hear your thoughts first.
Zoe Deschanel was a great choice. Anytime, always go Zoe. I love me some Zoe. She's cute in everything she plays. So
I mean, I like her character as sort of like a. I mean, she's similar to Leslie, for Jesse. She's sort of just a beacon of light in a dark world for him. Um, and I also really like that she uh, identifies that artistic talent that Jesse has and tries to foster it and takes him to a museum. I do think it's very strange how she just takes him individually on a day trip. Like that's just I don't know that is like
yeah,
legal.
she just straight up rolled up, and he got in the car and they left. She didn't talk to the parents. I mean, I guess it's mid '90s for you, where people did that, but I was shocked by that. She's like, "Hey, you want to go to a museum?" He's like, "Yeah." She just pulls up. She's like 25. He's like 12, and nobody questioned anything.
There is a question that I have, and Will, I'm excited to hear your strong opinions about her. But um, when they're at the um, Leslie's parents' house, and Jesse sees Miss Edmonds and says to her, uh, "Next time we should invite Leslie. She would like that." Do you think that he was like throwing shade in that scene, or was he just like kind of in denial, or how did you interpret that? Because it almost seems to me like he was trying to make her feel guilty.
I think I know the question wasn't directed at me, but I feel like he was processing his feelings there. Like, he felt guilty because he said himself that he didn't want her to go because he wanted to be with the teacher, but I guess he was taking his feelings out on the teacher because it involved her. But I think he was that was his way of processing, was next time we invite her, because I feel like he felt guilty that because he didn't invite her, she died. That's how I saw it. I'm sorry for interrupting the question.
No, all good. I was done.
So I think that what you're talking about was intended by the writers and director to be just a symbol of Jesse's utter denial that Leslie's actually dead. But the way that I interpret that scene and that quote by Jesse to Miss Edmonds is actually that's him breaking off their relationship. That's him breaking up with her. And let me justify that statement. So, in many ways, Alex, like you said, Miss Edmonds is a an older post puberty version of Leslie. I mean, Jesse is attracted to a lot of the same qualities in both characters, but he clearly has more of a sexual or like young boy crush, first sexual interest in Miss Edmonds that he does not have in Leslie. He sees Leslie as more of a cohort or a colleague or just a friend, a good friend. But with Miss Edmonds, he is clearly attracted to her. This is hinted at in the film when Maybelle says, or one of Jesse's sisters says, Jesse, your girlfriend's on the phone. Then he's instinctively like, Leslie's not my girlfriend. And then it turns out that it's the teacher, and he doesn't say anything. He's just like, oh, hey, Miss Edmonds. So he's clearly attracted to this character. You can see him sneaking glances at her throughout the entire film. And then we have this very strange moment where, out of nowhere, Miss Edmonds calls him, and again, as a 25, 30-year-old teacher, she offers this young boy, this young 12-year-old boy, to go alone with her to a museum. And of course, Jesse is perceiving this as a date. It's very strange how she picks him up. She's like pulling along the side of the road, doesn't even talk to the parents, doesn't even come up to his house, just scoops him off the side of the road and takes him to the museum. That is a very that's very nefarious. I think that's intentional. This is not meant to be seen as a good character. This is meant to put the viewer on edge. Like, what is happening? This is not normal. And when this scene happens, and the viewers clearly should be like unnerved by this, uh, Jesse looks out the window at Leslie's house, and he's contemplating, maybe going in and getting her, but then he would rather just spend the day with his crush, Miss Edmonds. They go to the museum together, and in the very final scene at the museum, they're eating, and Jesse's like, "We should do this again sometime." And Miss Edmonds is like, "Yeah, we definitely should." And I'm sorry, I don't care what anybody says. That is meant to be a parallel to a date. That is exactly what is meant to be conveyed there. And so when Leslie dies during this event happening, and Jesse's world comes crashing down, and he's lost his best friend, he subconsciously realizes how empty this crush on Miss Edmonds was. She's not somebody who he runs to hug and get comfort from. This Miss Edmonds is not meant to be a good character. She's neutral at best, and I personally think she's more on the antagonist side. It's like she symbolizes cheap lust winning out over a genuine friendship. And again, to answer your question, in the scene when he's like, "We should invite Leslie next time. She would like that." I personally perceive that as Jesse breaking things off with Miss Edmonds. Obviously, I'm not saying she perceived it as a relationship, but everything is definitely hinted at, in my opinion.
Well,
Well said.
very interesting. I mean, I totally agree that Jesse has feelings for her, and that he's sort of perceiving that field trip as a date. But are you trying to say that Miss Edmonds was seeing it that way? Because I did not get that impression at all.
No, I'm trying to say that the writers want us as the viewer to see her actions as like semi-predatory. I would talk to the writers right now. I would raise that same. I don't mean predatory like he's going to go get molested, but it's strange at best, and I mean it's predatory. I don't know what else to say.
Well, but no, but think about that day. Think about what they did on that day, and how like innocent, and not more than innocent, like valuable that experience was for him to get to go to a museum for the first time and see artworks. And like it, I don't think that anything about Miss Edmonds was portrayed in like a nefarious light at all.
I don't mean nefarious in the sense that she wants to take him away and murder him or molest him, because clearly that didn't happen in the film. But what I'm saying is, if you look at the film as something that's trying to send us a message, we are meant to perceive Miss Edmonds as a lust distraction for Jesse that causes him to deviate from the very parallel relationship he's had with his best friend Leslie up until this point. I would die by that. Everything I just said, I would die by that.
I don't know. I think you might be a little bit more of like a Freudian psychologist than I am. I don't think. I just don't agree.
Tell me I'm dumb.
All right, so based on that statement, Will, I'd like to know what was the name of the teacher that you had a crush on?
I've never had a crush on a teacher
Because I
ever.
feel like this hit you personally.
I've never had a crush on a teacher ever.
I mean, I feel like the probably the main purpose of him being gone when Leslie dies is to cause him to have guilt about it. Um, because yeah, I mean he feels horrible that he was doing something else and he didn't invite her. He even thought about inviting her, as it shows when he's leaving and he sees her house and he's sort of like, and but he doesn't invite her. Um, and he feels horrible about that. I'm trying to think. I mean, I guess I could say that, like, in that moment, why did he choose not to invite Leslie? Was the reason that he chose not to invite Leslie is that he wanted to have alone time with Miss Edmonds, that
Yes,
he
of course.
wanted to view it as more of like a date experience.
Yes.
And
I perceived it that way. I mean,
Yeah.
I perceived it from his angle as, he thought it was a date. I didn't perceive it from her angle as like a weird thing that Will went into. I see her more as a naive teacher, a young teacher who wants to inspire kids and just naive to the fact that that's just weird to pick the kid up from the side of the road and take him to a museum and
Okay.
not talk to the parents.
Guys.
Even though he's a good kid and said my parents said it's okay, but
Let's get real here for a second. I really hate to do this. I didn't want to have to do this. I really did not. Imagine if the roles were reversed and it was like a 35-year-old male teacher picking up a 12-year-old girl on the side of the road without interacting with her parents and not rejecting her advances when she's like, "Oh, we should." She's clearly infatuated with him and she's like, "Oh, we should do this again sometimes." And he's like, "Yeah." And then it's never mentioned again that that even happened. Like that would be extremely
wait,
strange.
didn't Jess say that? Jess said we should do this again sometime, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's what I mean. But she didn't reject it at all. She was like, "Yeah, we
Okay.
should."
Yeah.
yeah,
Like
I
I
mean,
said, I put
but
that as I put that as naive.
yeah, I mean,
Bro.
again, we're talking.
But yeah, I
about,
agree with you though.
We're
If the
talking
roles were
about
reversed,
a music teacher, an artistically inclined teacher who sees a kid who is very artistically talented and also very socially isolated and wants to provide that kid with some, motivation, some stimulation, some inspiration from the greats. You're saying, would it be creepy if a man was portrayed taking a young girl out to a museum? Well, I would say if the movie showed it as just like they go to an art museum and eat bagels and then he takes her back home, I would say that's not all that weird. I mean, like there's plenty of innocent relationships that adults can have with kids.
It's not appropriate, but listen to what I'm about to say. If everything was all fine and dandy with him interacting with Miss Edmonds and going on that trip, why did the movie feel the need to portray that situation initiating with Jesse's parents not being aware that it was taking place? Like you could have gotten the same effect of completely.
Because that's obvious.
No, it's not
answer,
obvious.
The answer to that is obvious because because when he comes back, his family thinks that he had died too. That's why his mom didn't actually like acknowledge or understand where he was going, is because it set up that tense moment where he arrives back and his family's all sitting anxiously waiting for him to come home and they're like, "Oh my god, we thought you were dead." That's the point of that part.
Okay, I have to concede there. You're right. I have to concede that point. You're correct.
But I will say, so after reflecting about him looking at Leslie's house and deciding not to invite her, I definitely concede that from his perspective there is an aspect of like choosing a cheap, lust based relationship over like a genuine friendship. But I just don't see the nefarious side for Miss Edmonds. I don't think I can grant that.
Would you? Okay, let's not say nefarious. Let's say inappropriate.
Um, Well, it like I said originally, like before we even started on this, it feels like it should be illegal. Like it definitely feels like process was circumvented for sure. But in terms of intention, I don't think that there's any negative intention. I just think like yeah, it's weird the way it worked out. Yeah, that's all I could say. But there, yeah, and the like the practicality of that whole thing was also that like I mentioned that this movie has plot holes, and I think one of the main plot holes is that okay, Leslie is found dead while Jesse is gone, and there has been enough time for police to be called. They have recovered the body. They have identified that Jesse is missing. The next door neighbors know that Jesse is missing. The police have to know that the next door neighbor boy who also hangs out with Leslie and crosses that river is also missing. Obviously, there would be cops at the house present. There would be cops going to the school, calling around, trying to find where he's at. Like, the fact that he just gets home and walks into the house and there's no cops present at all is just, like, ridiculous, in my opinion.
I can slightly disagree with that. I know nowadays you'd think, yeah, that doesn't make sense, but this is back early 90s, mid 90s. I remember I was about probably the same age as these kids when this movie came out. So I was probably, what was this? It was 94, right?
This was 2007.
It was not 2007.
Yes, it was.
Oh, it felt like 94. Jesus, never mind then.
It's
Well,
a
but
little,
even if it was 90s, go ahead and continue your statement.
Yeah, it feels like it was mid 90s, but in the mid 90s, that was normal. Like kids were out until dark time. Kids were gone all day with parents not knowing where the hell they were.
Yeah, but this is a scenario where they had recovered a dead body of the next door neighbor.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they didn't have social media back then, so you couldn't
But
look on somebody's
the police
No,
were there.
at the neighbor's house. Yeah, because it was the neighbor kid they found. How are the police supposed to know that she hangs out with the neighbor?
Because
Unless
they're
the parents
obviously
say so.
well. Because why wouldn't the parents of Jesse say so to the police? They've
I don't
talked to
know.
the police. They know that Leslie's
Because they're
been found dead.
distraught that their kid was found at the bottom of a river.
No, no way. They would think we need to go looking for them. They would have search parties in the forest going along the riversides. You know.
yeah, they would have the Terabithian guards looking for him.
Like again, I mean, I love
obviously
this
the
movie,
doesn't
and
make
it,
sense. It's really 2007.
Yes.
2007.
And the book was written in 77.
Damn.
Did you guys know it was filmed in New Zealand?
I think I knew that.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know it until this time that I watched it, and it's funny because actually I was thinking to myself early on in the movie, I was like, some of these hills and forests look suspiciously Shire-esque. But I just wrote it off. I was like, oh well, I guess it's some really pretty part of America, because obviously it's meant to occur in America. But what really set it off for me was when they capture that creature in the greenhouse, and I was like, hold on, what is that thing? I have never seen that in my life. That is not like a creature that exists in the U.S. And I looked
Wasn't
it
a
up.
badger? What did a badger, right?
No, it was a Australian possum.
Oh,
But they have them in New Zealand as well.
It was a squoger.
But but yeah, they wanted to get an American possum, but the like wildlife laws, they couldn't do that. So they had to get something local. And it's just kind of funny to me. I was like, what in the world is this thing? But
do they not have raccoons or anything over there?
guess not.
I feel like
So they
raccoon would make
basically
more sense.
so they basically had just some random marsupial they found on the ground and just shoved it in that trap.
I mean, it's just a local. They probably got it from a local, like, who knows?